I'm Matt Robbins. I'm the president of American Majority. We're a small nationwide nonprofit. We operate out of nearby Virginia. We're delighted to be here again with the full support of ACU and CPAC and put on this sort of pregame boot camp to teach people what needs to be done, what has to be done. So many of you are already doing it back where you live and breathe in your communities and homes. We want to deconstruct some of that today and give you even more updated content, even more particular 2016 content that will help you in the candidate or campaign of your choice. Is there anything big going on right now campaign-wise? At all? Nothing? Something maybe? So we'll talk about that. I'm pretty proud of our stats, our numbers. American Majority has been around only about 8 years. We've trained about 35,000 individuals. We've, out of that 35,000, about 3,000 have gone on to become candidates. Can you imagine why such a drop-off in the number of people who want to run for office? Any guesses? What is it? It's brutal, he says. Have you run for office, sir? Smart man, smart man. About 1 in 10 of the people we teach and train and speak to and reach out to actually make the sacrifice, which is immense. The financial sacrifice, filing fees, other expenses of running a campaign, the family sacrifice, time, energy, harmony, shall we say, among our spouses and our families in spite of the drafting of family members we do on campaigns, and the time commitment, the perseverance factor. So out of that 3,000, several hundred people have been elected to office because you have to include primary campaigns in that number of 3,000 candidates almost who've run. They've run in primaries and not made it through the general. They've run in the general. Several hundred sitting in office today. A little difficult to track elected officials. It's sort of a catch and release program at times. You put them in office. American Majority is huge, as so many of our friends and allies here today who are going to speak, as so many of our partners are on accountability and transparency. And so while it may seem short-sighted to put someone in office only to have someone else challenge them in a few years, there's usually a good reason. There's usually a good methodology to that and a reason why somebody in a short span of one term in office is able to find people angry enough or disappointed enough to support an individual or another campaign to run against them. I encourage you all to go on social media as we're talking. I'm going to talk for a few minutes first. We're going to have partners from Americans for Prosperity speak after this, experts on Latino vote, experts on social media, experts on winning in blue states, and then finally an expert on sort of messaging and communicating with people who are not traditionally Republicans in our sort of lowest common denominator world today, not traditionally conservatives. So I encourage you to live tweet if you're on Twitter. How many use Facebook in the room? Good, good. How many use Twitter in the room? Good, good. Big hands in the back. Mr. Steve Sutton, our biggest fan, will be live tweeting his entire existence today. And then other platforms. Which other platforms are amenable to real-time reporting, shall we say? Snapchat. I can't understand anything my nephew sends me on Snapchat, but it exists, right? It's for a little younger demographic. There's all sorts of platforms. Use the ones that work for you. I encourage you to go on our Facebook page, AmericanMajority.org. We'll link you there. Go to our Twitter accounts of our staff and our team who's here today. Go to Americans for Prosperity. Go to Mike Madrid. I'll talk about each one of these speakers as we introduce them. We'd love to have you and see that footprint and see the activity carried elsewhere. We're not live streaming this video today. I did a live stream a couple of weeks ago. It's always interesting to hear the numbers that are watching online or sleeping online, whichever it is. But today we are recording this for posterity, and we'll jump right into it. I chose my title purposely, and I chose it provocatively. Why would I say in a post-Obama world? Why would I talk about the C word in a post-Obama world? I thought community organizing was a one-trick pony. I thought it was going to be gone when he is. Any comments, questions on that? Is he good at it? Is this president good at community organizing? Absolutely. And I will give out some door prizes during this lecture if you give me an especially good answer. I will. You'll be surprised how good some of them are and how bad some of them are. Community organizing in a post-Obama world is something we have to think about. This is my graphic. We use something called Prezi, P-R-E-Z-I. It's a little more fun than PowerPoint sometimes. Gives you whiplash other times. But we'll jump right into it. This may be the question many of us are asking, and I ask for your indulgence as I ask this question provocatively again. What just happened last night? An election across how many states? 11 states. And we saw grassroots communities, we saw grassroots movements, we saw people mobilized, motivated, and organized. You'll hear those first and last words from me over and over again. mobilize, and organize. Just like the back of the shampoo bottle says what? Rinse and repeat. That's right. It's really that simple. You do it over and over again, and he or she, with the most people mobilized and organized, what happens? They win. They win almost every single time, unless there's dirty tricks, unless there's shenanigans, as we say. So I'm going to go backward to go forward. I'm going to take you into my brain, which is a very scary place, and talk to you about my perspective of community organizing during the last 7 or so years, when we have had the community organizer in chief sitting in the White House, when we've seen Alinsky-esque tactics, Alinsky Rules for Radicals books come out and be learned by some of us on the right, some of us on the center right, be used against us many times, and talk about the organic movements that have come about in the last few years. Where do I start? Right there, the sort of mother source. I'm going right after President Obama's campaigns, historic campaign of 2008, obviously. I'm talking about center right and some other movements in my short lecture today. The Tea Party, can someone tell me for the first door prize today, can someone tell me why the first spontaneous Tea Parties formed in February of 2009? Yes, ma'am. Very good. A charging stick goes to you. It's a device you'll need here in the next few days as you run out of power and juice on your device over and over again and can't find an outlet. Rick Santelli made a rant on the floor of the Chicago Stock Exchange decrying what? TARP and the bailouts of the big banks, which was precipitated by the mortgage industry, precipitated by the bailout of that one particular group that bled over to other financial industries. But a lot of folks forget this. The Tea Party was not an anti-Obama thing. It was an anti-W thing. It was an anti-Republicans and establishment in power who were coming about to bail out the big business, the too big to fail, the phrase that Hillary likes to use more and more now as she goes in her campaign. And then it morphed from there. The target became Obamacare and then the 2010 midterms. Were these things successful? And was anything done against Obamacare by the Tea Party movement? Nothing? Nothing was done. I thought there was a U.S. Senator elected in blue Massachusetts. Who was that? Scott Brown, maybe not your biggest fan or your biggest friend as a true blue conservative, but he was elected based on grassroots mobilization and organization. He was put in to stop Obamacare tentatively. My opinion is the Tea Parties pretty quickly devolved into echo chambers. And when I say echo chambers, what do I mean? I know my voice is bouncing off the walls as I use the words echo chamber. I love this lady. She's going to come up and co-teach with me here in a second. This is great. They were talking to each other. They were talking to the already saved. They were talking and preaching to the choir instead of to their fellow Americans. I loved what I saw in February of 2009 and even April of 2009 on tax day. I saw spontaneous, I saw truly unique Americans who had never been involved in political anything their entire life come together and coalesce and start to talk about what is going on with the folks we're sending to Washington, what's going on with the folks we send to our state capitals. I met guitarists, I met stay-at-home moms, I met business owners, I met homeschoolers, I met all sorts of people who had basically abdicated their responsibility for decades of political involvement. I would say that the Tea Party, and I use that word carved up, not in a pejorative way, I would say Tea Parties quickly found themselves forming factions and going to organizations that helped them, whether it was Freedom Works, whether it was Americans for Prosperity, whether it was the Tea Party Express, whether it was Tea Party Patriots, 912 groups under Glenn Beck. I would say all these groups found voices and sort of came into certain lanes and came into certain spheres and started to talk out of those sort of cones and those sort of voices. They had an impact twice more, in my humble opinion, in 2012 and in 2014. What was the impact in 2012? Any impact in 2012? Increased what? They did. They did. And in 2014? Absolutely. So they're building, gradually building methodically on their successes and going forward. 2016, where are they? Where are these voices? Where are these Tea Party voices? Where are these 912 voices? Where are they? Are they with Donald Trump? How many in the room, show of hands, how many in the room think they're with Donald Trump? You don't, no fear here. One. Is Sarah Palin, is she the litmus test for Tea Parties? Not anymore. So even Sarah Palin is not pure enough for Tea Party any longer, right? It's an academic question, sort of. Clearly not is the answer. I would argue this train has run its course. I would argue these otherwise loyal, patriotic, committed Americans have sort of reached the end of the road as far as organizing and mobilizing via this mechanism, via the Tea Party brand, label, and I say that not offensively to anybody still involved in those groups, because I know many groups who still meet monthly, talk daily, forward messages to one another, and encourage one another to do civic things like voting and informational awareness. But I think there's other things that are happening now, larger things that are happening now. Let's take another one. Flip side of the coin. How much do we know about this group? Occupy Wall Street. Not too terribly long after Tea Parties. Yes, ma'am. So not an organic movement. You don't believe Occupy Wall Street was an organic movement? Unions are part of them? What's their message? What was their message? That's right. And that would include mathematically whom? All of us, right? I don't have my Goldman Sachs suit on today. Yes, ma'am.
I would actually say, like, the Occupy Wall Street movement, similar to the Tea Party movement, is like the definition of spontaneous order.
I would agree.
People going to cities, camping out, protesting. I'm not saying I agree with the 99% thought, but I do think it's true.
Thank you. You get a T-shirt if I can direct one to you. One of our bright red shirts. You can be like one of the security guys on the Enterprise. I would argue it started in much the same way the Tea Parties did, with a couple of organizers, a couple of people spontaneously going to do this on their own, and then the other bigger forces dovetailed in behind it, the Soroses, the unions, and other groups. Their message was compelling. This was their giant megaphone, income inequality. Why is 1% making all the money? Why is 1% located on Wall Street making all the choices? This has happened. You've already mentioned the tents. What happened when you started to see the media and the news reports of them living in sort of filthy tents along, I think, Zagati Park or wherever it was in New York City? What happened to their message? Everyone tuned out, right? No one knows in this room because we all tuned out. It overcame their original message, overcame their original ideas. They were never able to storm the castle. They were never able to get penetration by their message. They stopped mobilizing and organizing, and the message devolved again into one of sort of chaos, dirtiness. I think there were even some assaults and rapes in the tent cities, and so that was really subsumed by all that. They never took off. How about this one? Is that controversial to put into a presentation at CPAC? No. Not at all. Not at all. It's an organic movement. It's a movement made of people, our fellow citizens. And what's their message? What is it? Anarchy, you say. Was that their original message? Hold on. I want to hear the answer. Honestly, you think so? Yes, ma'am. Did you have an answer?
Oh, I was going to say that, well, some of that was brutality and
That was the initial protest, correct? Anybody know why they formed or when they formed? What event triggered their formation? Which one? It's earlier than that, actually. It's not Michael Brown. Yes, ma'am. Trayvon Martin, the acquittal of George Zimmerman, is what triggered the organic, spontaneous protest on the Black Lives Matter. Then came Ferguson almost a year later, from July 13 to August 14. And while, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, and while they devolved into a message of anarchy, sometimes rioting, very carefully calculated, I would argue, rioting and protesting in certain cities, the movement mobilized and organized individuals and groups from Oakland to Baltimore. Anybody remember the footage from Oakland? Is Oakland a traditionally conservative city? No. Not so much, right? Berkeley's right a stone's throw away. Coast to coast, they're organizing these. And you can see the same individuals. I'm not a conspiracy guy. I'm an organizer. You can see the same individuals organizing the protest and bringing in protesters and blanketing the airwaves, social media-wise, with their message every single time. Do you see a trend here, by the way, in these movements? Do you see how they start spontaneously? They're sort of professionalized sometimes. They're sort of co-opted sometimes. They devolve almost every single time. This is their 1-2 step every single time. Is social media powerful in 2013, 14, 15, 16? We have a presidential campaign being run on Twitter right now, right? On Twitter, 140 characters at a time. Misspellings or no misspellings, right? Every single time. It's being run on Twitter. Last point on Black Lives Matter has added a component of LGBT, has added a very, very heavy emphasis on sexual identity and sexual identity as a protest mechanism. It's going to muddy their message. It's going to dilute their message. Here's the last one of these quick little race through the movements in the past 7.5 years. Anybody know that was the name of Trump's movement back last year in July? Anybody know that? He didn't have the hats made yet, right? Trump simply said it as a catchphrase, and it stuck. I talked to reporters yesterday about how it happened, about how over the last 8 months, 9 months, Mr. Trump has gone from businessman, reality star, product mogul, casino magnate, hotel builder, just checking my suit to be sure it's not his, to a political force to be reckoned with. It could not be replicated. It could not be done again by anyone else except this one gentleman who possessed all the brand marketing, all the name recognition, all the resources, all the media attention for this to happen. And so I would argue out of the four, this is one that is not similar to the other three. Here's how it happened. Of course, media covering him nonstop. What's that, number two? Is that a common thread between the other three movements as well? Our friend and ally next door, Mr. Morton Blackwell, says that anger is the most motivating force in politics. Is that true or false? It's like Star Wars, right? The dark side of the force. You've got to be careful how you use it. Voter rage has percolated and bubbled up and bubbled over, manifesting itself time and time again through each one of these movements, through each one of these radically different demographics. Are the people going to Tea Party rallies the same ones camping out in New York City in tents? Are the people camping out in tents in Occupy Wall Street concerned about minority rights and protests most of the time? No, they weren't. No, they're not. And are any of those movements, I would argue, part of the Trump steamroller? I have not found evidence of Tea Parties and the previous conservatives in these three examples being part of the Trump movement. I find new entrants. I find new voters. I find new people, just as I found in 2009, 2010, people who had been not involved in the process. Why is number three up there? How was the establishment part of this? Was it a secret plan to foist Donald Trump upon the political landscape? A lack of leadership. He gets a charger. A lack of leadership. And why would a lack of leadership, why would a vacuum in political leadership allow the Trump phenomenon to happen? There's no choice. There's no brand B. There's no Pepsi to the Coke. Yes, ma'am. All three of these movements are looking for someone to save the day. Are they not? Why hasn't it worked? Wait. Who's we? Who's we? Okay. But are Tea Partiers all Republicans? Because the ones I met were not. Are Occupy Wall Street, are they Republicans? Are they conservatives? And yet they want a lot of what us Main Street conservatives want, what Mike Huckabee talks about Main Street versus Wall Street. How about... Has Black Lives Matter been successful? Have they? Have they? What's the metric? What have they won? Did that change in Baltimore for Freddie Gray?
Well, if they quit profiling, then they would. I mean, if that was what they were saying, that they're being profiled.
So that's changed.
Right. Well, I'm sure it is.
You see what I'm asking? I'm asking you for hard metrics of success here on each one of these movements, each one of these groups. Yes, ma'am.
In the other groups, for instance, the Black Lives Matter, they were talking to a special interest that
The phrase special interest was invoked. Go ahead, I'm sorry. You say that one of these four movements, Black Lives Matter in particular, appealed to a special interest. Did the other groups appeal to special interests? I'm making air quotes with my fingers. What's a special interest? I'm a special interest. Are you a special interest? Our interests are aligned many times in having what? Constitutional government, having law and order restored. Other groups have different metrics, different goals, different visions. Is a special interest wrong by definition? It's not. You're right. It's not majority. Else these movements would not be aligning.
I would say that what Black Lives Matter is trying to create anger and hostility.
Are they creating anger?
Yes, in the black population.
Did the Tea Party create anger?
For the established.
Did Occupy create anger? I'm asking. I'm sort of being something right now.
Black Lives Matter has actually failed because there have been more deaths in Baltimore, for instance, because of police backing away.
Is that demonstrable? Is that empirical evidence? Do we know that for a fact? Or is that a perception? Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I'm not to agree with a lot of people, but I think when it comes to being successful in a media sense, then yes, Black Lives Matter has been very successful, and I think that's the objective in the first.
The perception of reality.
Of course, the policy part didn't come about until later on when people actually wanted objectives and policy matters to be heard later on, but that was not the original intent of Black Lives Matter.
So let's step back for a second. I'll come to you in a minute. Let's step back and say how many out of these four movements, I know one is still yet to be determined, how many of these four movements can plant a flag on a hill and say victory? How many? Can Tea Party claim victories? No? No victories for the Tea Parties. Say it again.
Laws that got them in there. The reason they were voted in is because people weren't happy with the laws that had been passed. But
So we got new people into the swamp that is Washington, D.C., only to have them discover it was much more of a hot tub, and it felt great.
so if their goals were less government in our lives, then that's not happening. I mean, if that's what their stated goal was.
And you think there's been zero success on that legislative law front since 2009? Very little. I love it. I love it. Yes, ma'am. They did. We are a society of perception. We are a society of image. We are a society of branding and products. You do realize you're being marketed to every single moment you're awake of your life, right? And it's not a new phenomenon. It's not Google reading your Gmail. It's not sifting through keywords or meta tags or any of that, search patterns and cookies on your computers. You realize it's been tailored to you by Madison Avenue since the 1920s. You realize this. Almost 100 years now, straight on. And we do the same thing with political movements, political products, which is why Mr. Trump is doing so exceedingly well. We do the same things with movements. We commodify them, we label them, we brand them, we wait for an outcome. I would say each one of these has surged through their life cycle at present. Black Lives Matter remaining to be seen fully what their next step might be, and Trump obviously being the big shoe to drop. Here's Trump's contradiction to what I do for a living. Mr. Trump have much of a ground game, much of a door-to-door game, much of a live phone bank volunteer game. He relied almost exclusively on messaging, on branding, on marketing, on volume, on anger, on bloviating, on reaction. Are these bad things in and of themselves? Do they work? They do. We've all paid attention. Thank you. And we hope we don't let you down. And the unconventional primary structure. Did Trump, again, did he have the field staff? Did he have the organization in the early states? Did he have the people out there? What was the one area he excelled in on the ground? Which one? Phones. You got phone calls? How about what's the crucial step? Oh, phoning in the news program so you can read your tips. What's the one thing you must have to be on the ballot? Signatures. Do signatures happen spontaneously? They take mobilization. They take organization. Even Mr. Donald J. Trump had field staff at supermarkets, in neighborhoods, in subdivisions, getting signatures. Let's bring it around the horn here before I wrap this up. These are the two R's of Mr. Trump, his rallies and his reach. By definition, the people coming to Richmond Speedway, the NASCAR track in the capital of Virginia, by definition, the folks coming to the stadiums in Alabama. By definition, the folks coming to see Mr. Trump are already doing what? They are voting with their feet. They're self-selecting. They're already energized. They're already identifying themselves as pro-Trump, energetic. How hard is it to get someone to come to an event, especially a political event? Did your friends want to come join you right here, right now? I didn't think so. It takes momentum. It takes effort and energy to move the inertia, and yet he's overcome that. And these folks, once catalyzed, once mobilized, are willing to sign petitions, are willing to show up on primary election day, which are all over the calendar, all over the country. I saw another comment.
I don't agree that these people are voting with their feet when they go to the rallies. I went to several rallies, Trump rallies, and
As a spy. I'm
just to see what he
sure.
And a lot of people, like, no offense to Iowa, but out there, there are no,
Go see the spectacle.
go see the spectacle. And I think that draws a lot of people.
And do you think that makes them more or less inclined to vote for the...
I think it's neutral.
It's neutral. So leaving a positive, frenzied rally and holding on to that feeling on caucus day in Iowa doesn't predispose you one way or the other to vote. Yeah, but you're a pro. You're a pro, right? You're immune. The reach and the mobilization of these folks. This is the goal, right? The man, the brand, the marketplace, the candidate, the political movement, the empowerment. I don't think he even thought he would get this far. And I'm sorry to spend so much time on him, but he's the most recent manifestation of these movements. The wheels are in motion, and I think it's truly, as I've talked to so many of my friends, a unique, unprecedented election year. Our work continues in American Majority. Your work continues where you live and breathe. Sorry to zoom all the way out from the stratosphere back down to the microscopic. How many of you know how much money is spent on your local school board? Liz, our local county school board reached $1 billion budget this year for the first time, right? $1 billion with a B for the kids, air quotes, for the kids. How many of you know what the budget is on your local city council or your county board or your county commission or your mayor's office or your deputy mayor's office? How about your state rep, your state senator? And we'll just stop there. We'll stop right there. How many staff members do they get? How many perks? How many offices? How many reimbursements? What's their per diem? What's their pay? Do you understand that while these are nationwide movements that have taken a voice and taken shape and taken thousands and even millions of Americans into their folds, do you realize that your tax burden, your tax dollars, the everyday decisions that affect you are being made right where you live, right in your locality? I hope we realize that, and I hope you realize you have the mechanisms to replace any or all of those people at any given time. Sorry for the whiplash approach to movements and mobilizing and organizing. I'm going to open it up for a couple of questions. I think I have one or two prizes left for a particularly good question, right? They say three. Who disagrees completely with everything just said at the front of the room? What a great group. What a great group. Be sure and pan the camera around the room like that. Yes?